Hi, I'm Maloni Bhatt, and welcome to ET Boardroom Dialogues presented in partnership with Diageo India. This is a series of conversation to spotlight water and carbon actions for a sustainable future. And at this closing fireside, I'm very happy to have with me Madhulika Sharma. She's the Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer at ITC. ITC, as we all know, is an Indian conglomerate. And before ITC, Madhulika was the Chief Corporate Sustainability at Tata Steel Limited. She spent nearly 3 decades in various positions there. Madhulika, wonderful to have you here with us today at the Economic Times to speak on carbon neutral business, pathways to decarbonizing industries, and accelerating the shift to sustainability. Welcome.
Thank you, Maloni. Pleasure to be here.
No, it's our pleasure to have you. Your company has a diversified presence in FMCG, hotels, software, paper boats, agribusiness. What are the key pillars of your sustainability outlook? And how do you make all these diverse sets of businesses sustainable? What is your challenge when you set out this blueprint, especially because your businesses have so many stakeholders?
No, so I think even before the word sustainability became more fashionable to use, I think ITC has had this ethos of triple bottom line, and one of the pioneers of actually converting it into action and decision making maybe about 2-3 decades ago. And so people, planet, and profit has always been at the core of strategy or any decision making when you are either thinking about diversification or growing up any business or any initiative, so to say. So that's why when the iconic e-Chopal, when it was initiated, it had actually what it had was that since we had an agri presence, it had a people and a planet at the core, but then it also ended up in Britain. In terms of giving better realization to the farmers, you also ensured that that relationship was built and availability for your operations. And since then, ITC has been scaled up, but that relationship building has helped you to ensure your cost and price and availability of key commodities for your other businesses. So I think that has been at the core. Having said that, of course, formally in terms of kind of a ESG framework in a sustainability, I think for us in terms of environment, the key focus is of course climate change. And when I say for climate change, it is not only for decarbonization or looking at climate risks only for our own operation, but again for a extended value chain, because we have very deep value chains both upstream and downstream. So that's one thing. And with climate change is integrated water and biodiversity. So these are all actually interrelated subject, but form a very one key piece of one very big focus area for us. The other is, of course, since as you said, we are a consumer product limit basically, and of course we also have services like hotels. But looking at product sustainability and looking at how are we able to give much more, not only from a quality and innovation or design perspective, but also build the sustainability aspects in our products and services. So like hotels, So again, ITC hotels have been at the forefront of leading the responsible luxury credo. And ITC actually has all the hotels that we own, they are all green building LEED Platinum certified. And I was just doing some data check yesterday and found that in India, there are some 146 buildings which are LEED certified. And 40 of this, about 36 is owned by ITC, which means almost, about 1/4 of these buildings are owned by ITC. So very significant focus is there on green infrastructure. So not only, like decarbonization, but also building green infrastructure. The other is, of course, circular economy, where it's not only process waste, but also looking at our packaging, because again, being a product oriented. If I look at from a social angle, of course, apart from, human rights, both within fence and outside fence, supply chain sustainability is again, taking a lot of mind space. So one of the emerging areas, I would say, supply chain sustainability, again, from a perspective of, having a very wide value chain. So these are some, key focus areas for us. In terms of challenge, you rightly said, we have diversified businesses, but then what we have done is like basis these kind of subjects, what are material to or one, there is a S2.0, which is like a common minimum denominator which applies to everyone. So those are like on energy, water, etc. Those are targets, and every business has to find that, has to fulfill that in their own businesses. But then, of course, there are nuances for a specific business. For example, for hotels, it's a service sector. So things which are much more material, we focus or we take some specific initiatives under that. The food business, which is the most growing business, has got aspects of nutrition, has got aspects of food safety, has got aspects of now, even introducing new nutraceuticals so that you look nutrition at as a subject. So all these are material issues. Then we look at that nuanced view of that business. But that's a challenge. I mean, being at a corporate, tying it all together, that's a big challenge. But then that's also the fun of working in a conglomerate. So.
All right, and I think, you made excellent points. People, planet, and profit. How do you tie all of that together? So I think the challenge really for a lot of corporates is, how do you make green pay, right? And, at least ITC seems to be on a path to doing that. What you also spoke of, Madhulika, was the upstream and the downstream value chains. And I want to focus on some of that. Companies measure the greenhouse emissions through scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, right? Scope 3 emissions make up about 75% of the industrial carbon footprint, and they occur outside the organization's boundaries. Very often they're neglected, and for many they pose a challenge. So I would love to understand how ITC is managing the scope 3 emissions, and within that, what's been your biggest learning?
So scope 3 emissions, rightly said, but for ITC, we have done a very macro level estimation for us, for our kind of business spread, which is there, where we have a papers, which is a very manufacturing intensive kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Our scope 3 is around 80%, and 20% is actually scope 1 and scope 2.
Wow.
So obviously significant amount of it. And of this 80%, actually 70% comes from our raw material that we source. More and of that 70% raw material, it is largely in the agri sourcing. Right. So we source a lot of wheat, we source a lot of sugar, a lot of these things. So obviously they all come with an embedded carbon footprint. The other 7 to 8% comes from logistics, both upstream and downstream, because you are bringing it to your factory or you're taking down to your warehouse, from the warehouse to the actual retailer. The other 7% is in packaging. And then there's something also on logistics, I think I've covered. So yeah, these are broadly the big areas that we focus on in terms of our scope 3 emissions. Also wanted to say that while this is a very macro level estimates that we have made, we are also we have initiated one of its own kind of a study with Terry to do the baselining of our emissions, scope 3 emissions, so that we actually have those hard numbers in place, because that will help us we are taking initiatives. For example, our entire initiative on climate smart agriculture, which I'll talk about later, is on the upstream, addressing the 70% of our scope 3, which comes from our farm value chains, right? But then to prioritize exactly where does it sit? It sits in wheat, or it sits in paddy, or it sits in sugar. We are doing a baselining kind of a study, which is one of its kind. And basis this, we will tweak those programs, put more resources where it needs to be done, facilitate some programs. So this is again on our scope 3. And of course, the challenge is you can do a one-time baseline, but then how do you keep reviewing, measuring, monitoring, and reporting every year, right? That's the biggest challenge. And I think technology is a key enabler here. So obviously, we are not yet up there, but that's a way forward that we are.
Madhulika, how's the role of the private sector evolved in strengthening, say, water actions or carbon actions in India, and in terms of deeper collaborations, say, with the government and with the public sector? Speaking from your experience, with ITC and also with Tata Steel.
No, I think private sector, even while India has now committed to 2070 only last year, but I think even when I was in Tata Steel, the biggest issue there was a huge carbon footprint, which is as part of scope 1 itself, right? The footprint resides in your within your fence, and carbon is in your process. It's not a fuel, but it's in your process. So obviously, to find an alternative which also works economically, and then also technologies which were developed over 200 years, and then to look at it, the new technology of hydrogen, etc. It's not very easy. And the same here, when I've come to ITC, we have much more in scope 3, and then the scope 3 challenges are different. So obviously then, but I think corporate India has been pioneering, even without regulations, even without when these conversations were there. I think because these are large organizations, they are also connected. When we do a strategy, like we also look at global context, we look at local context, and then we say, okay, this is what we need to do. I think largely the bigger organizations, I'm not talking about mid or a small sector, but they knew what is coming, and I think they initiated their actions on these subjects, and that's why sustainability, I think, in both these organizations is now at the center of strategy. It's not no longer a separate department. You are right at the center of the strategy formulation. Anything that you do now, whether it's an acquisition, growth, anything, you look at from a sustainable perspective. So I think corporate India has been doing their bit in terms of whatever can be done. Of course, we are still markets are still price sensitive, right? And more so in the FMCG.
Right.
How much the consumer can only take so much. So how much can you, there's one another pillar for which businesses are there, which is a profit, right? So you have to also make profit. So I think the dilemma of the organization is how to pace their programs so that it, while it is creating a larger good, you are also balancing it with profit, right? And to that extent, I think the policies help. So now there are a lot of policies which are actually helping some of this transition. The policies on renewable is also very robust, and that's why you now see this very significant move which has happened in 1 decade. Now you see the same thrust from the government coming through the FAME program, so the EV adoption. I think that's how it's a journey, but I think things are progressing. I think one would like things to be much at a faster rate, but there are too many. I think if you look in pragmatic view, I think there are too many things happening around, and even government has to take into consideration their stakeholder set is much more larger than our stakeholder set. So obviously, but things are happening, and I think there's a very, I think if I say again from two organization perspective, the how the mood or how the view of responsible advocacy from both sides, I think from the regulator side and also from the corporate side, is very, very mature and very, and I think it's working very efficiently.
Right.
Yeah, and it's it's actually yielding results, and things are happening, the regulations are happening in the direction they should happen at a pace that they should happen. I think
you have the ITC Sustainability 2.0 agenda. Any forward-looking plans that you could share with us?
Well, it's all there in the public domain, but yes, of course, but it is again for our scope 1 and scope 2. What I share on scope 3 is work in progress, and hopefully, it will start coming as a point as our S2.0 agenda also, because we are still understanding what it is and what we can take as a public commitment. But yes, that's something that you can look forward to, of integrating the scope 3 and the supply chain part into our S2.0 agenda. But the S2.0 agenda is very, very clear, and I think the focus is on very accelerated decarbonization. So of course, the focus is on adoption of renewable across our businesses. We are already at 40, the goal is 50%. We are already going to be this year 43% of our overall footprint comes from renewable energy. Similar thing on water. I think on water, we are very advanced. We have gone beyond just looking at rainwater harvesting creations. We are now looking at integrated watershed management. We are working on 4 river basins in the country, and already a sub-river basin, which is Ghor of Bhima Krishna, that we are working on. It's already turned water positive for 5 years. So these are aspects that we keep strengthening our goals also as we go forward. So the goalpost also keeps changing. We keep continuously learning and seeing that, okay, if this is achievable, then how do we move our goalpost and then create much more aspirations. But of course, look at it from a view of also a people, planet, profit lens, right?
Madhulika, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here with us, to share your thoughts. Thank you so very much for being with us here on the Economic Times. We wish you and ITC the very best on your journey.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Miloni. It was lovely having this conversation with you. All the best to you too.